Okay, so we're starting recording the session. Anybody who isn't here tonight can catch up. I'll put it out on YouTube as normal, so you can pick it up at any point you want in the future. Okay, good evening. Purpose tonight is really to talk about planning sessions. Now, at level 1, and we're still talking foundation coach level here, all I'm going to ask you to do, and we'll talk it through, is plan a single session. And I'll give you a briefing for that. When you get to level 2, then you're planning a number of sessions building up towards an event. It could be a race event, it could be a charity event. When you're level 3, you're planning a year. So the principles are the same, and as you see, we start off simple and then we go up in complexity. So planning a year's worth of training will be quite interesting, because we have 3 level 3 coaches. So Pink Lionesses will end up with 4 years worth of training. So that's good value for money. So there you go. But like I say, we'll take you right back to start, just planning a simple session. Let me just share a screen with you and explain a little bit of detail for you. So can you see that slide that I showed you on day 1? Lao Tzu, yeah? And I mentioned this at the bottom. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Now, what I mean by that is, I could be talking forever and ever about different concepts, about training, about coaching, about steering dragon boats. But if the student, and that is you in this case, is not ready to receive that information, it becomes a waste of time. So, as I say, if I'm talking a particular form of language or in a particular way that it's not getting through to you, I need to change my message. It's not just a case of expecting your students, athletes, your paddlers to change their way of receiving. Okay, so it's a bit of a challenge for coaching, but obviously a good challenge that I quite enjoy. Now, moving forward, you may have seen this before, you may have not, but let me just take you through what I consider to be the 3 phases of learning. So you're in this cycle at the moment. The first phase, and there's lots of ways of doing this, this is just the most simple that I can think of. The first phase, and you're in this phase now, is information transfer. So in this case, I'm giving you some information about dragon boating and coaching and helming and all the rest of it, and you're absorbing that information. And very often, you go, right, if you're not on mute, can I just ask you to mute? Can you mute yourself? Okay. Could we all mute, please? Thank you very much. Excellent. That means everyone can hear what's going on. Brilliant. So first phase, information transfer. This is where I'm passing over information to you and hopefully you're absorbing it. Lots of information, but the next phase is more important. It's not just a case of me talking a load of stuff, sending you a load of information. If it never gets read, it never gets understood, it's of less use and may even be a waste of time. The most important part really is the processing, the understanding, and the integration. And this is the way we do this. We can do knowledge checks, we can ask questions in the sessions, but also I'll be setting you short assignments. So for example, the short assignment that we did last week in relation to risk assessment, that's part of the information, not the process, the understanding and the integration. It's where I get some feedback from you as to whether you're absorbing the information and whether you're understanding information. And it gives you, as the learners, as the students, as the athletes, an opportunity to reflect on what we've been talking about and to process that information and decide whether you've understood it. And if you haven't understood it, you then come back to me and I represent it and we get it clarified. So that's what I'll be doing in terms of setting you short assignments, 15, 20 minutes. That's all it is. A little knowledge check as we go along. The third phase, once you are qualified, is really the application of that knowledge. And the example I'll give you is taking a driving test. So you take a driving test, you get some lessons, you process the information and you pass the test and you get a license. And then you really learn to drive, or in this case, learn to coach or learn to steer a dragon boat after the course, when you're trying it with different people, different numbers of people in the boat, different configurations, and that sort of process. So that's where you really learn. So I'm giving you the information, I'm testing your knowledge, but you really get to understand it and decide what sort of coach you want to be, what sort of helm steerer you want to be after the course when you start applying that knowledge. Now, what stops people learning? Well, fear and apprehension. And this is an adult thing, and it's adults the world over. People are concerned about how they look to other people. They're concerned about asking what they think are foolish or stupid questions. As I said from session one, the only stupid question is a question you don't ask. And this is relevant to you when you get to coaching as well, because you'll be having the same issues with your students, with your paddlers, with your team members. So I always say to people, I really need you to learn like a child. Now, I don't mean that in a childish way. What I mean by that is most children, and my own children are good examples, they're happy to, they fail and they learn. And you learn by trial and error. So please, in all of this process, do not, whoever you are, whatever sort of experience you've got, do not be concerned about how you look to other people, because the whole process is about you learning. And if you've got to make some mistakes in the process, that's absolutely fine. In fact, that's good, because you always tend to learn where you think you've failed at something, you tend to learn those lessons better. Okay, so I would embrace failure in the learning process. Okay, it's an important part of it. So when I say learn like a child, that's what I mean. Just be, yeah, most things you'll pick up straight away, but some things may take some trial and error. Some people will learn it straight away, some people take a bit longer, and that's just the way we are. We're just different. Now, what some inexperienced coaches do is they don't accept any questions. Coach knows best, and you don't ask any questions at all, and the coach just gives you front-loaded information and you just absorb it, and the coach gets frustrated because they don't take the time to check and assess and work out whether you've absorbed and you've learned and processed and understood the lessons they're trying to give you. So the sort of coach I'm looking for you to be is to be that coach that asks questions and also asks questions and challenges their own knowledge and also the knowledge of the people they are going on to teach, because it's about the learners, it's not about the teachers. Okay, so this whole course, this process, wherever we are in the coaching process, it's not about how good I may or may not be as a coach, as a teacher. It's about how good you will become as a learner. Yeah? Okay, so that's what that is all about. Now, that said, this is the interactive thing. So it's an open forum here, and this is questions. So running a training session, we're talking really basic, and I'll give you a task in a little while, but a really basic training session. What is important? When you're running a simple training session, is it important to have aims and objectives? What do you think?
To have what?
An aim, an objective, or, you know, when you're running a session, is it a point to have an aim to the session? A target?
Target of the session. Okay. Okay.
Yeah?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Whatever. So I'm talking about really simple sessions and really complex sessions. So
But we still give them a target, even if it's just a technical session.
Okay. Okay, then. So if that's a good idea, so somebody else now, why? Why is it a good idea to give people, or to have, when you're running a session, aims and objectives?
Gives you a sense of achievement.
Okay, it gives you a sense of achievement, but it gives certainly the learner, the student, the paddler a sense of achievement. Yep, okay, that's one. Anything else? Any other reason?
When you have aims and objective, it's you have motivate to get to these goals, no?
Yes. So you're motivating you as the student, as the teacher, and the students as well. Okay, absolutely. So there's motivation aspect to it. Something else. There's lots of reasons.
They know what they are going to do, or and why.
Absolutely, and that's a really good point, because if people just turn up at a training session week in, week out, they don't know what they're doing, there's no plan, there's no structure. Well, don't be surprised if they get a little bit frustrated and don't turn up anymore. If you have a plan and you've got a goal and you're moving towards something, for example, you might say, in 6 months' time, we're going to paddle round Lake Tiberias, around the Sea of Galilee. Okay, so we're going to train
Also,
in a certain
Tim,
way.
Tim,
You see what I mean?
also a good reason, I think, when you put a goal to each session, to each training, you can check yourself if you achieve what you wanted or not.
Absolutely.
How it was working.
And what you'll find as you go on in your coaching career, you may run a training session or a series of sessions and have 6 goals and only achieve 5 of them, because you have to spend more time. So you'd say, for example, I think this session, this running a training session, talking to you, will take about 40 minutes, 45 minutes to an hour. And yet, if I'm not getting the information across to you and there's lots of questions, I may have to spend more time on that. But just in case you get all of the points and we go through it very quickly, I've got another session ready to go just in case. So that's about prior preparation and planning on my part. You see what I mean? So you've got to be flexible about it, but you're having aims and objectives gives a structure to your learners, a structure to the students, and also keeps you on track as well, and stops me talking, in this case, talking about random things. So we're talking about a training session, not how to paddle, not how to steer a dragon boat in this case. You see what I mean? So it keeps you on track. Any other points? Good points there. Any other reasons why we'd have aims and objectives?
When you say aim, you actually means like a subject in a specific training and not goals.
Yeah. I mean, really, in this case, aims, objective, yes, it could be a more aims and objectives, a little higher level, or goals for the session, but a point, a target for the session. That's what I'm talking about.
Not a target to reach, but the target to get specific at the same training.
Yeah,
At the
absolutely.
same
Target.
session. Yeah, okay. So I think
The target is working both sides.
Yeah.
It's working for the coach and it's working for the crew.
Yeah,
Okay, if the crew,
absolutely. Limor, give me your point. You're just saying.
I think when I'm new at something, or when there's so many details, most of the time I'm losing most of them. So if we get in specific at the part at the same session, I think it's more easy to observe it and to pass it when you get a spot on something. So it's
Absolutely.
easy for
The
the
effort.
student.
To
Yeah.
build the effort
Easier for the
rule.
Yeah.
I think when you have a goal, you have you can do the plan. You can
Yes.
do to plan the training, because the goal is competition. So the training is going to be for competition. It depends what is the goal and the object, no?
Yes, it could be just getting better. It just could be reaching further. It doesn't have to be a particular goal, as in getting fast at 200 meters. It could be anything. It could be a process goal. It could be an outcome goal. And we'll talk about specific goals at level 2. But the last reason I wanted to look at is it's showing your paddlers, showing your crew respect. It's showing them that you've taken the time to plan a good quality session, because they're coming to you and they're expecting you to give them a good quality training session, to learn from that, to become better paddlers, stronger paddlers, or just have a good time. So you have a responsibility, and I think respect is a good thing. If there's a structure to it, and there's aims, objectives, goals, targets, then that's showing good respect to your crew, as far as I'm concerned. So,
Tim,
yes,
I think also that when you are setting a goal for each training, it's force you to learn what you want to do in this training.
yeah,
So it forces the coach to learn what you want, which kind of drill you want to do. in
And-
the specific.
Yeah.
So each
to
each training
improve
when you
from
prepare
time to time.
each training when you prepare yourself, it forces the coach to prepare himself
Okay.
and to learn more.
Yes. Yael, you were saying.
They can, the coach and the crew can see how they improve from time to time, from session to session, because they have some plan or aim, and you have to see what did you achieve in every session.
Absolutely. People say in management, when talking about management, what you measure, you can manage. But there's
Yeah.
also what you measure, you can understand, okay, and appreciate. And in terms of measurement, it doesn't have to be measuring a time, but if you've got a goal and objectives, you either meet the objective or you don't. And if you fall short, then you come back and reassess, because not all goals and objectives will you reach or will you achieve in every session. But it gives you some degree of measurement as to how you can either change your message, adapt it, improve it, but you're moving forwards all the time. Yeah. But if it's just random, then you might have a great time, but you need to get some structure to it. So that's really what we're talking about. So that's the point. You need also to think about your method of training and method of instruction. Now, you may have a formula. The formula I use, I got from the British military, and it served me well. It changes. EDIP, that basically means when you're introducing a subject, explain, demonstrate, imitate, practice. So if I was showing you something about technique, I'd explain it to you, I'd demonstrate it, you'd then imitate it, and then I'd fault check rather than fault find, and we'd practice it. A very basic formula. There's lots of different formulas of doing it, but it's a way of getting information across, once again, in a structured way, and also making sure that you're hitting various different learning styles. So some people learn by doing, some people learn by hearing, some people learn by seeing.
אפשר לסגור רמקולים, מיקרופונים בבקשה, לא שומעים.
So once again, if you're not on mute, could you go on mute, please? I mean, if you need to talk, come off mute, but then go back on again. We talked about method of training and instruction, also manner, the way you put the message across. I mentioned this in session 1, and I talked about this. It's in the previous recording. CMADE, which is being confident, methodical, showing attention to detail, being diligent, and being enthusiastic. So a question is enthusiasm. Why? Yes, but why? Why? What's the benefit of being enthusiastic when you're a coach?
Tim, can you repeat it? It's confident and methodical, and then
confident, methodical,
yes.
Showing attention to detail, being diligent or studious, really, and being enthusiastic. This is all in the handout, okay? So but my question is, enthusiasm. What is the benefit of being enthusiastic?
If you're not
It's,
enthusiastic, you
give-
can't expect anyone else to be, really.
I think it's contagious.
Absolutely, and that's a good sort of contagious. If you are enthusiastic, everyone else will be, and it is absolutely contagious. It's a bit like laughter yoga. If you've ever done laughter yoga and somebody starts laughing, you will start laughing, and your body cannot tell the difference between fake laughter and real laughter. And if you don't believe me, I'll demonstrate that when I come to Israel. It is absolutely contagious. Exactly what you're saying. The more enthusiastic you are, you create a situation where people enjoy learning. And it makes it interesting for you as well. And it's great feedback from you if people are enjoying what you're doing. So the more enthusiastic you are, the more people will benefit. They'll enjoy your sessions and they'll come back for more. Okay? And you'll be an in-demand coach. But if you're miserable and you're moaning and blah, 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 nobody's going to be interested in what you've got to say. You could be the best coach in the world. But if you're miserable and you're not interested and it's too boring, well, who wants to come and sit on your boat and listen to you being miserable? Okay? So that's a responsibility that, as a coach, sometimes when you've had a bad day, you've had an argument with your partner, the boss has been nasty to you, sometimes you've not fake it, sometimes you've got to sort of be more enthusiastic than you want to be, because it's about the learners, it's not about you. Okay. Okay, methodical attention to detail. I mentioned that. Why? What's the benefit of that?
If
Just paying attention. Anyone who's training and who is learning would like to know that that somebody's looking at him personally. I think,
Okay.
and also as a crew, but I think attention is very, very important.
Okay, brilliant.
attention,
Ella, what do you
how
think?
they pedal and
Yes.
how they pedal, every move they do, help them to understand the mistakes and to fix them and to show you what on what do you have to go over and over again.
Absolutely correct. Now, there's something that's unique about dragon boating, because you could have yourself and 20 people in the boat. So you've got to have, it's a balance, isn't it? Because you've got to be focusing on the session, you've got to be focusing on the crew and focusing on the individuals. So as we move on to level 2, we'll talk about how you do that, how you do one-to-one programs, how you do a crew-based program, how you look after sections of the boat. And by having, once again, by having a structure to your session, if you did one-to-one training every session, that would be great for one-to-one, but the whole thing wouldn't move on. So by having a structure and layers to the training, this is more level 2, level 3, then you hit all those points. But if I was, say, coaching Ella every session, then Ella gets great coaching, but nobody else does. So we need to achieve that balance of attention to detail, attention to the crew, and people also, when they come and they get some individual attention, even if it's once every 3 sessions, then you're getting a bit more personal buy-in from your paddlers, from your crew. Okay, so worth thinking about. So your manner, should you be relaxed, chilled out, really assertive, do this, do that? How should you be? How should it be when you're delivering?
Assertive.
Assertive when you need to be, but how about do you need to be assertive all the time?
But nice, you know.
Right.
Nicely
Yeah.
assertive.
Right, nice, absolutely. But like we said, not aggressive. But if it's stop the boat, it's stop the boat, brace the boat, listen. It's not, could you stop the boat, please? You see what I mean? So it's knowing when to give the right message across. And it's, once again, it's like dealing with children. Those of you who have children or have children around you, if you're shouting at children all the time, it just becomes background noise. So once again, texture, there's lots to this. Okay, how about sticking to time? So if you've got a session, 45 minutes, so I've got about an hour's session today. What happens if I talk for 3 hours?
I think it's
No,
very
it's,
important. I think it's very.
You'll be on your own.
I think it's
No,
very important.
absolutely, and that's really important. There's a great saying in leadership training that you've got to have a rear view mirror. So it's all very well leading from the front, but if you haven't got a rear view mirror, you don't know whether people are still with you. So once again, sticking to time. I'm not talking about overrunning by a few minutes, but if it's an hour's session and I overrun by 3 hours, well, it's not very respectful, and it also demonstrates to you that I haven't prepared very well. Yeah, because what I've got to do really is get the information across to you, judge how long it would take maybe, and then maybe a bit of 10 minutes either way for any questions from the group. Okay, so we make sure we come in on time. That's really important. And often people come training and they've got to go off and do something else. So it's, once again, a lot of respect. And if you want respect from your crew, my point is, as I said before, you've got to start by giving it. Okay, so
Also,
nobody respects me because I say I'm a coach. You know, I'll demonstrate hopefully why I may or may not be worthy of your respect. Okay, bit about coaching again, just recapping on what we spoke about. What's in it for me? So why do you actually want to be a coach? It's worth thinking about this. I'm not going to ask this as a question now, but clearly you get something out of it. But you need to really think about what the benefit to you is. And when we say to people, why do you want to be a coach? Very often they'll say, well, I want to help the crew. I want to do this. I want to do that. And it's very altruistic, very outward going. But there's lots to be had, a lot of benefit to you as well. It's worth thinking about that and reflecting on that and actually why you're doing it. Okay. It's worth bearing in mind that every time, even me talking to you now, every time, every human interaction is a power relationship. It's not an opportunity for me to say, I'm the boss, you're not the boss. I'm not talking about that. But what I'm saying is, if you have the position as a coach or even as a boat captain, with that power comes responsibility. That's my whole point about that. With great people say, with great power comes great responsibility. Okay, so worth saying. As a coach, more so than as a boat captain, your personal philosophy, your coaching philosophy is on display. You can't fake it. So your actually underlying motivations, and even now, even though my father has been dead 30 years, I was still, I mentioned it last week, he always used to say to me, know your job, do your job, get it right first time. And when you're coaching, these things come out, your own personal philosophy comes out. So it's worth thinking about that. Not too much, but just thinking about also your personal strengths and weaknesses or development points, not to avoid them, but to help you enhance you, frankly, as a coach and also as a human being. So reflecting on what's in it for you is not a selfish thing, it's an altruistic thing, and it helps other people as well. And also, if you have a coach who very hopefully doesn't make too many mistakes, but is, if they make a mistake, you admit it straight away, rather than a coach who's just on a pedestal, never makes mistakes. Well, yeah, that individual's never been born. Clearly, you don't want to be making lots of mistakes, but certainly in your learning process, as you become a better and better coach, you will have some hiccups along the way. And once I say, just absorb those, just accept those, and move on, and always be moving forwards towards being better. Okay. We talked previously about communication skills, and it's a great opportunity to develop those. And I say that because if you're talking to your group, your crew, and they're just not getting it for some reason, then you as the coach really has to think about changing your style so the crew will pick up the information. Okay, that's just spending some time thinking about what motivates you as a coach. And obviously you also got to bear in mind your impact on your students. Now, not just Pink Lionesses, people, I have this conversation a lot with all sorts of crews. You don't realize as a crew, as a coach, what positive impact you can have on people, on their lives. Yeah, there are coaches I know who think, and there's probably a lot of truth in this, that this particular sport that we do, the community aspect of it, has the power to really positively influence and change people's lives. Now, you don't know when that's going to happen, but it's just being aware of that and just being aware of the way you get the message across, because you never know. Somebody will come up to you one day and say, you know, as a result of your coaching, I've changed the way I'm doing this, I've changed the way I'm doing that. And it really is very gratifying when you can say that and you get that sort of feedback of people. So when you're planning a session, even at basic level, you need to know what the purpose of the session is. It doesn't have to be very complicated, but it has to be a specific aim or a goal or a purpose or a target. So just going into the detail a little bit, you all talk about warming up and cooling down. So just a question, why do you warm up? Why do you cool down? Because very often this gets missed. What's the benefit of warming up and cooling down? Let's just deal with warming up first. Why do you warm up?
Again, we want to avoid injury.
Okay.
The muscles.
Okay, so you're warming people up physically. That's one. Now think a bit deeper.
And
Yes.
mentally, to prepare them to the session, to the training session.
Okay.
And to become all together with me, to see every one of the crew.
Okay, so there's three things mentioned there, and that's really the reasons you're doing it. You're warming people up physically, obviously avoiding injury, getting the blood moving through the system, so that the obvious physiological benefits. You're warming people up mentally. Very often people will be working during the day, coming in, and what you really want people to do is leave any troubles, strife, issues at the door on the way in, come and have a bit of respite from those, enjoy paddling with some good friends, have a good time, have a great session. And then very often, like any problem, isn't it? If you pick it up on the way out, you may not pick it up at all. But like I say, you don't want people to bring problems into the session, but a great way to get people focused and work in the same direction. And the other point that Yael mentioned was teamwork. I mentioned, I think, the 4 T's: timing, teamwork, technique, power transmission, 4 fundamentals of paddling from my perspective and lots of people's. And the teamwork side of things, you're warming people up as a team as well. So they're working as a team, as a unit, as an entity from stroke 1 rather than halfway through the session. We've mentioned goals and targets. If you're doing a series of sessions, I put basic paddle technique, but you may end up in a session doing some revision of previous, if you're doing a series, so you're just checking back for learning. When you're planning a session, obviously you'd have some idea, as I mentioned, about the duration of the session. And if you're doing 3 things or 4 things, you're doing some aerobic training, some anaerobic training, some technical training, roughly how long you're going to spend with those. So you planned it properly. So I haven't tried to sort of shoehorn 3 hours of training into 1 hour. So it's a sensible level amount of training with a bit of a margin, just in case I overrun a little bit. You've got to think about any likely problems or risks. Now, we'll talk more about risk assessments next week when we've done the return. But when I say likely problems, that could be things as simple as the weather conditions and having to adapt and alter and change the session depending on circumstances. You may have a session planned for 20 people and only 10 turn up because there's a traffic problem or a work problem or people can't make it. So you've got to be flexible. What you'll develop as you go along, I use this term tapas, and you're more it's a simple session. And when I run a session, whether it's a youth session, in the main, not always, unless I'm training for something specific, I use this little mnemonic tapas. And tapas, it'll be in the handout, stands for this. Apart from warm-up, there's some aspect of technical paddling. That could be analysing paddling, it could be working on stroke technique, technical drills, structural drills. There's some aerobic paddling. So we call it tempo training, maybe about 70% effort, get people warmed up, aerobic. There's some proactive paddling. What I mean by proactive paddling, we might be using the crew to turn the boat, to maneuver the boat, using different parts of the crew. There's some anaerobic rather, so you're raising the heart rate, working harder, maybe a few short sprints, maybe a hit session, something like that, and it's always stylish. So really, technical, aerobic, proactive, using the paddlers or working with the helm or whatever, anaerobic and stylish. And that's really, it could be anything, but that's the simple template I use for a basic session. You may have some other stuff, but once again, it helps you to create a structure. When we get,
What would you consider stylish?
Say it again, sorry.
What would you consider stylish?
The way you paddle.
The way
Elegant
Okay.
paddle. It's not just a case of stick it in the water and hope for the best. It's about style. It's about panache. It's about elegance.
Thank you.
That's how you look. It's not what you got, it's how you got it. You see what I mean? These things are important. Okay, you might think it's a little bit superficial, but you know, it's always got to be stylish as far as I'm concerned. And if you're talking about stylish, graceful in the air, powerful in the water, something along those sort of signs. So it's not just a case of going down the race course 200 meters in 45 seconds or 50 seconds or 145 seconds. It's about how you do it and how you look as a team and whether you're in time, in phase, in symmetry. Okay. And the last thing, I mean, you may or may not use this as we get more into coaching, then using video and that sort of stuff. If you're going to use, but the reason I say this, if you're going to use other technical aids, when we get more into level 2, level 3, then we'll be talking about use of video analysis. Obviously, make sure any stuff you're bringing in works. You've checked it, you've tested it, same as I would do here. Before I run the session, I go through my PowerPoint, so I make sure the PowerPoint works, I make sure the share works. So I'm not spending 10 minutes of your time, your paddling time, working out how to work my video. So that's what I mean by that. Okay. Bit of feedback. Now, this is really, really, really important. Feedback is often overlooked. I say feedback is the gift that makes you great. But feedback is important. And when you normally talk to paddlers, talk to athletes, and you say, well, how did that feel? Most people will just focus on the negative. And if they've done, say, for example, say they're a paddler and you've picked them up, you've done some one-to-one training, and you've mentioned 3 great points that they're doing, fantastic. You've got a good reach, you've got a good leg drive, head up, back straight, looking where we're going. But actually, you're rolling the wrist a little bit. They will always focus on the negative. Okay, that's human nature. So my suggestion to you is when you give feedback, and I'll talk about when you give it in a minute, but when you do give feedback, I would suggest you use this formula, GBH. In English, that's grievous bodily harm, and you may know that, but forget that for the minute. The G is good. So when you give feedback, always start with what somebody is doing well. Because it's all feedback is good as well as developmental. So what are they doing good? Then tell them what they could do better. So that's your negative bit. Okay, it's not the bad bits, it's developmental. We're moving forward. So what is good? What could be better? And then tell them how to achieve it. Because if you just say to them, well, you keep rolling your wrist, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're losing the catch, and you don't tell them how to improve, well, you're not really coaching them. All you're doing is criticizing. So criticism becomes positive feedback when you tell them what is good, what could be better, and how. And if people have 20 things to develop, then it might be a good idea just to give it to them in manageable bite-sized chunks rather than saying, here's a long list of 20 things that you could do better, because that will demotivate people. We're not saying tell them they're good when they're not good. We're not saying lie to people. What we're saying is every paddler, there's no paddler on earth who's doing absolutely everything wrong. And what we want them to do is keep the good points and develop the points that could be better, not lose the good points. Okay, so we're building as we go along. GBH. Obviously, when you're feeding back, you're giving information, but you've got to receive information as well. Active listening. So it's all very well me talking to Yale or Ella or Ruvik or anybody, and if I'm just blah 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 blah, this is wrong, this needs, it just becomes white noise. I've got to be listening as well. Not shouting, certainly not shouting.
Like shouting something at the back of you don't pay attention if you all the bad things and nothing good.
Yeah.
So it's fade in the air.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, yeah, absolutely that. So you've got to be receiving as well as giving, and that's an important part. Feedback is a two-way process, because they may say to you, actually, well, I don't quite understand when you're saying don't roll the wrist, for example, or whatever it's going to be, and you end up explaining exactly what's happening. You actually you're destroying the catch or whatever it's going to be. Okay. So when would you give feedback? Okay, a question to you. When do you feed back to people?
During the session and at the end of the session.
Okay. So just take the end first. It could be a hot debrief at the end, but what I like to do, and I think who was it? Mayo mentioned in a last sessions about when you do and when you don't speak in the boat. Now, obviously, when you're working, but I like to do a piece, a part of the session, and then stop and get some feedback from the crew in relation to that before we move on. Okay, so there's a time and a place. And once again, I think it shows good respect for your students, to your paddlers, if you give them the opportunity. But it's not, they don't want them feeding back all the time. So we have a nice respectful structure to it. You listen to them, you speak to them, get some feedback from them, and it works much better in my opinion. Feedback should always be positive, hopefully goes without saying, and you're looking to praise and encourage people. People is underlined because you're talking to people, okay? And it's people skills you need, obviously, when you're talking to people. Feeding back again, you may, at the end of your session, when you do your hot debrief, you may not have achieved all your particular session goals or objectives, so you can revise those for next time. And then another part of feedback could include the next and subsequent sessions, and looking forwards, that E shouldn't be there, so I've misspelled that, apologies, to the next session. And building in, so once again, it's part of the structure, but feedback is part of your session structure as well. Okay. Last little bit, exercise frog spawn, and this is where you come in. It just happens to be called frog spawn. So this should take you, and I'm going to talk you through it now, no more than really 20 to 30 minutes. And I'm going to send out via Ilana a little template once again, just fill it in and send it back in. This is the brief. So you're now a boat captain and a level 1 coach. And a local company, it could be a finance company, any local company wants you to provide a training session during a leadership and teamwork training day. So they've decided they're going to take a day away from the office. They're going to do some leadership and teamwork training in the morning with a leadership and training guru. And in the afternoon, they're going to do some practical, and you're going to come in and you're going to give them a dragon boat session. And all I need to do, the whole session will take about 2.5 hours. That includes any briefing, any debriefing, any feedback, anything, the whole thing, 2.5 hours. It's for 16 to 18 people. What I'm looking for is very basic level. What resources do you need? What equipment you might need, you might think you need. What planning considerations are there? Basic level. And maybe what permissions and agreements do you need to do the session? Okay. So what I'm looking for, and you'll see it, that is a couple of goals and objectives, targets for the session, and really what you need to do it and who you need to talk to get permission to do that. Now, that will be for over the next week. And I'll once again ask you to feed that back via Ilana. I'll send out a sheet, so just send it straight into Ilana and she'll send them to me. But just talking through this, just give me some ideas. So 2.5 hours. How much time do you think of your 2.5 hours might you spend paddling?
But one question before, there is between 16 to 18 people. In Tel Aviv, we have boat of 10 people, so...
Okay, 8 to 10.
Boats.
8 to 10, okay.
Yeah, but just imagine, just maybe not Tel Aviv. You could be in Haifa. It doesn't matter. You've got a dragon boat, so you've got available to you a big dragon boat and a small dragon boat, and that's a really good point actually, because you might decide to take 2 boats instead of 1 boat.
Yes.
And you might decide, actually, I'm going to run some races. You see what I mean?
Jim,
So
ask them to come to the Sea of Galilee. We have a boat of 20.
Okay. So this is the point. So what I'm looking for you to do is say, well, if I've got 16 to 18 people, and this is a good point from Mayo, shall I put them in 1 boat? Shall I put them in 2 boats? Shall I put them in 3 boats? If I put them in 2 boats, I need 2 boat captains, don't I?
Yeah.
So this is what I mean about deciding how you're going to do it, what you're going to do. So the question, just to go back, if you had 2.5 hours, just give me some ideas. If you had 2.5 hours, how much time would you spend?
Paddling, I will spend them on the water about 1 hour. Not more than 1 hour on the water paddling.
45 minutes, not more than that.
Okay.
I say 1 hour, but you need to give them the
including the instruction and the warming up.
Okay, so this is what I'm saying. So you have 2.5 hours. So within that 2.5 hours, you're going to have to do a safety brief. I mean, you've got to tell them how to paddle.
Excuse me, all the session is 2.5, or every session? All the time you have for this group is 2.5 hours?
Yes.
You have to do it at once, or you can split it in 3 or 4 sessions?
No, it's one
session?
Yeah, so
one session, one time.
You want to tell you now what to do?
No, we're just talking about it now, and then you can, so I'm just giving you the context of what I mean. I'm just going to get some ideas off you. And for example, if you say to me, well, we haven't got a boat, well, you may have to get a boat, for example. But they've come for a training day. They're doing something else in the morning, and the afternoon session is 2.5 hours long, and that's how long you've got them for. So they'll walk in the door, they'll walk to you at 1 o'clock, and they're walking away from you at 3:30. So everything you're doing with them is within 2.5 hours. So you need to think about how you're gonna, how long for briefing, how long for how to paddle, how long for safety, how long for paddling, how long for debriefing, how long for feedback, how long for juggling, how long for playing basketball, whatever you're gonna do. Yeah, the whole session.
Is it okay that I decide, let's say that I will decide to take them in between these 2.5 hours to 2 sessions of, let's say 30, 40 minutes each, and to make a rest between them?
That's up to you. This is what I'm trying to get you to think about.
Okay.
Not just get in the boat and paddle for 2.5 hours. How are you going to use it? How are you going to give these, how are you going to stay enthusiastic? How you're going to give these people the best possible introduction?
The best 2.5 hours in the, yes, okay.
Yeah, okay. So there's a good point from Mayo there. It doesn't have to be 1 session. It could be 2 sessions with a break. Okay, or it could be 1 continuous. Up to you.
We do it in Israel a lot because it's very hot. You have to have a break in the middle because very hot.
If it's very hot, then you may need to think about, when you're talking about what resources and equipment they need, you might want to get some drinks, you might want to get some shade.
Hats, yeah, and long shirts. We always we're doing it.
You know what I mean? You might want to say to them, okay, well, you need some exposure protection. Make sure they bring a hat. Make sure they have long sleeves or whatever. So think about those sort of things as well.
Let them swim in the Yakol River, Neil.
Okay. Well, if you want them to come back, or if you don't, it depends on whether you want them to come back or not. But like I say, if it was somewhere else, and if it was a youth session, a children's session, and the water was safe, then you might say, well, I'm going to spend half an hour briefing, 30 minutes briefing, then we can do paddling, then we do a feedback session, then we can have a fun session where they can have a swim. So it's not a silly question when you think about it. That might be possible maybe in Sea of Galilee rather than Yarkon River. But you see what I mean? It doesn't have to all be paddling.
Okay.
It's all about teamwork as well. Yeah. What resources, equipment you need? What planning considerations are there? Now, what sort of thing am I talking about there? So what sort of basic planning considerations? And we spoke about these last week.
Excuse me.
Yes.
It sounds like we're planning an event. Is it an event or introducing them to Dragon?
Yeah, it's an event.
It's
Because we're talking about coaching, but we're just planning like an event, fun event for.
Yeah, for company for 2.5 hours.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're doing it all the time. Yeah, we're doing it.
Okay.
זה כאילו לעשות,
actually produce.
זה בעצם כאילו
you're talking
לעשות
about
מערך
produce-
שיעור?
be imaginative.
כאילו הכרה.
מה?
זה כאילו הכרה לחברה או מנפן, גיבוש.
כן, so producing a good day for a company team. Like a crew. Actually producing, not coaching.
No, just produce it. Just this is top level. What you're going to do. I mean, when it comes, how you coach them, that comes in at level 2. But really, the broad outline of what you're going to do during that session. And as we say in coaching, you are limited by your imagination. Yeah. So I'm interested to see how you're going to get this message across to people. Yeah. But what sort of, just briefly, last few minutes, what sort of planning considerations? Give me some ideas about the sort of things you want to be thinking about.
The equipment that you need and they have to bring.
Okay. So very good. 2 parts of that. What equipment do they need? And it could be they need to turn up with sunscreen.
Water, clothes, whatever.
Yep. Okay.
And then you have to warm them up.
Yes.
A little bit, not a little bit, instruction and the safe instruction, and what is the Dragon Boat? Maybe a little bit history or something, depends on the group and the aim and the, okay.
And if you remember from last week, we talked about the standard briefing. You don't have to use this, but there's 7 aspects to it, and that covers how to paddle, safety, a bit of history of dragon boating if you want to. Like I say, if you had 2.5 hours, then I know I normally do a very, very potted history of dragon boating, so they understand what it's about. Yeah. If you think that would work, yeah, that's fine.
What is budget?
What about
what is the budget of the company?
Oh, no, don't worry about that. Don't worry about budget.
You want to know the ability of the
Barbecue
people.
and you know.
The budget is unlimited.
Guys, don't forget.
So we
guys,
can
that-
eat before the training and after the training and during the training.
I think you'd want to know if there were any disabled people or what the levels of fitness were of
Yes.
participants, so that you
Well,
could prepare.
that's a good.
But
So
you have to know it in advance.
That's what I said.
Health of the
Guys.
people that are coming and the age, because it's a different.
I don't care about the age. I want to know that they can, that they'll survive the trip.
Yeah. So for example, that's a good point. Like I say, just high level stuff, not the ins and outs of everything. But if you had, say, for example, a group of people who were elderly, say, I'm 60 this year, so older than me, 60, 70, 80, and there's no reason why you couldn't paddle at 80, then the intensity of the session would be different. If it was a youth session, maybe a bit stronger. So that's a good consideration. What is the nature of the group? Are they people who are used to paddling or used to physical activity or not? Implication, if they're not used to physical activity, they're going to be getting in the boat, doing a bit of technique, bit of paddling around, maybe a long break or longer break. So they're introducing them exactly. So considering, that's a good planning consideration. What is the nature of the group? What is their fitness conditions? Any obvious medical conditions? Okay. Because if they'll say to you, well, we're a heart disease support group, then you might be saying, well, this may not be the right activity for you unless you've got the clearance from your doctor. Now that's a bit more detailed, but for example, but any top line considerations, that's good. Okay. Any other planning considerations? So there's stuff about the group themselves. Any other things might you think about?
Insurance
be-
cover?
It could
Okay,
be in
yeah.
the beginning. Sorry, it could be in the beginning that if we meet in a place, in a closed place, that we can screen a little short video about the history of a dragon boat or different videos. Also technique, but not really technique, but just in order to look to have something to look forward to.
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, you could do that in advance. Or I mean, the good thing about YouTube is somebody's made a YouTube video. I make them myself about absolutely everything on earth. So I'm sure there's going to be a video, 5-minute video about the history of dragon boating. And it's also good because, great point from Sigal there, because they'll be listening to your voice for 2.5 hours. And very often, if you get information coming from a different direction, it could be a video or somebody else, then it just breaks it up a little bit and gives it a bit more texture. So that's worth thinking about. Yeah.
I
These
think
sort
the
of things.
timing as well is very important. So if you're
Thanks,
getting
sorry.
them fresh in the morning, the timing, are you
Okay.
getting them fresh in the morning, or are you getting them the graveyard shift after lunch?
It's
I mean,
after
that makes
lunch,
a
and
big difference.
that's why I said that. So in the morning, they're doing a sit-down session about leadership and teamwork. But the reason I say that is because you might say, well, leadership and teamwork. I do some stuff in the UK with something called NCF, the National Citizens, so NCS rather, National Citizen Service. It's for youths. So what I did with them was I just found out what the aims and objectives of the National Citizen Service were. So when I run an NCS session, I tie it into their objectives. Now, I'm not expecting you to do that, but If it's leadership and teamwork, well, that's a gift for dragon boating, because dragon boating is, after all, a teamwork consideration. So what you might decide to do, I'm going to have a quick chat with the person who's doing the leadership and teamwork training and try and hit the same objectives. You might do that. That's a bit in depth, but you might want to go into that sort of detail. That's fine. Okay. Any other planning considerations?
I think it's important to have all the safety, like life jackets, prepared, and also enough paddles for each paddle.
Absolutely. So if you've got, and this happens a lot, and any coach will tell you, the group will say, well, 16 to 18 will turn up and 20 people turn up. So it's always worth having a few spares.
Yeah.
They could break a paddle. Always worth having a few spare buoyancy aids, for example, and making sure you know how they work, and so you can demonstrate it. So a little bit of prior preparation planning is required from you as well. Simple things, but if you're told 16 are going to turn up and 20 people turn up on the day, and you've only got 16 paddles, well, that's not very good. And you can anticipate certain things. You can't anticipate everything, but a few extra people turning up is something that is a reasonable anticipation. You're not going to get 40, but you might get a few extras. Or some people are going to turn up, the manager might turn up and say, I'm not going to take part, and you can persuade them to get in the boat and sit. You see what I mean? Those sort of things. How about weather?
Depends, of course.
Yeah.
If you are talking about summer, so you have Israeli summer, it's better early in the morning or late afternoon, but depends. Kinneret afternoon, it's not very easy to paddle.
Okay.
So you have to plan to know what the weather or the time of the year.
That's a good point, isn't it? Because at the moment, it looks like they've got
in Tel Aviv, early in the morning, you have a lot of traffic, so in the water. So I'm not taking the risk.
Okay. So it's, well, like I say, considerations, but you might decide it's a better option to do the physical first. But like I say, consideration. And Yael said, yes, of course. Yes, of course, but nobody mentioned it. So you see what I mean?
Because we thought speaking about the summer today, tomorrow. So
don't go into too great, just top line considerations.
Okay.
You might, I call it W4: wind, water, wave, and weather generally. Yeah. So weather conditions, water conditions, wave conditions if you're on the coast or it's wet or it's windy, and always have a contingency. So I'm planning to go into the wind or whatever, but it may be that on the Yarkon there's lots of traffic, so I go in a different direction or whatever. And the last thing to think about is what permissions and agreements you might need. Now, obviously, if you're using a club boat, you need the permission of the boat owner. That's obvious, but there may be other stuff that you need to get permission for. So that's really where we're going. Yeah.
Ask permission from each one.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously they've got to be willing to take part. Now, next week I'm going to introduce Manifest. Just a question for you. When you do let me just stop the share. The last point I'm going to ask you, and I'll send this to you. When you do a training session, do you do a manifest? Now, let me just share this screen. Let me just share one more thing. It's called, I call it a manifest. You might call it something else.
Not really, we don't.
Hang on a minute. Let me just show it to you. Music coaching, Cyprus. One of these. So do you do one of these? Hang on. Taking a bit of time to come up here. Come on, open.
אילנה, למה הוא מתכוון?
אני חושב הוא מתכוון למשאבים.
Do you keep a record of who goes on the water?
No.
Yes, I do.
No.
לא הבנתי.
רוביק, זה מה שאתה עושה בטבלה, מי עולה, איפה יושב, כל דבר, שיהיה לך תזכורת לאחר כך.
הכנה לפני הירידה למים.
This is I'll send this out to you and you're welcome to have a look at this. But this is something I did for Cyprus. So that we call this a training manifest. It's a list of who goes out on the water. So basically you've got
okay.
the date, the training event location, who was the boat captain, who was the helm.
I'm doing it any session.
Right. Next session, when we talk about safety, I'm going to go into this more detail. But this when I do this, and I have this for every session, and it has those points at the bottom. So it's a checklist of the things I need to cover. So I would check wind, water, wave, general, the W4 that I say, is it checked to say, is the boat fully equipped? Is it in good condition? Has it got a radio? Everything that you need that you normally take out, first aid kit, phone, radio, channel 16, whatever. Any non or weak swimmers, everyone's got a BA, buoyancy aid. We covered that last week. Appropriate clothing. They get a safety brief, make sure that's done. They warm up and cool down and record any crew injuries. So that's what I call a manifest. You'll call it something else, but it's a log of who went out on the water. And it's also a checklist of those 7 things and other things that you think are important to make sure that gets done. And all I do is I put the names of everyone who goes out, who the coach was, who the helm was, who the boat captain was, who was number 1 responsible, who's the number 2. And I tick off those things to make sure they've been done, and I sign it, and that's my record of the session. Yep.
Okay.
So that's that. So that's any questions. That's just over an hour. So apologies for that, overran a bit. Any questions on your very short homework? 20 minutes. If you're doing more than 20 minutes, you're doing too much. It's just top line. What am I going to think about? Who am I going to ask? Where am I going to do it? What's the point of the session? A couple of objectives. That's all. Not a thesis. I don't want a thesis. Just what am I doing? Why are we doing it?
But we need to stick with leadership and teamwork. No.
You can do. It's up to you. It's up to you.
Okay.
I mean, if you think about it, anything in drag boating is about teamwork. So, but you might say you're there to provide a good session. If you want to link it into teamwork and leadership, fine.
Mm-hmm.
But that's your choice.
Okay.
Okay. And you always have a choice. Any questions on what I'm asking you to do?
Fully we understood.
So the homework is to make a plan.
I choose the group, what age and everything, yes, and what the weather condition.
Yeah, I mean, shall we say if they're? Let me just say that if they're working for a company, they're going to be aged between. I can tell you this: they're aged between
until 60.
Yeah, yeah. But it's worth asking. It is worth asking if anybody has any particular medical conditions. That's worth asking.
Yes, of course.
So the homework is to make a plan for 2.5 hours for 16 to 18 people from my company.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly that. And what I'll do is I'll send out the brief to Ilana, and that can come out to you, and it will be that's pretty much it. A few checklists.
זה כמו איזה, שנייה, אני שואל בעברית, זה כמו איזה מערך שיעור? It's like we do a lesson in the school?
Yeah, just
what the purpose, what all the practice we need to do.
Yes, but just bullet points.
Points.
I don't need not a 6,000 word thesis.
לא, בערבית אפשר גם בעברית, לא? במילא הוא לא מבין את זה. Okay, I understand.
Last question. Why am I asking you to do it?
To see if we are listening to the lesson.
Yes, because remember at the start we said there's the information phase and there's the understanding phase. So this is now the understanding phase that you're getting it, and I'm interested in your own innovation, your own ideas, your own ingenuity. What I'm not looking for you to do is just reproduce what I'm telling you. I'm looking for your ideas and your individuality. That's it.
Okay.
Okay. Right, in that case, no more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and the recording will come out. So if you've missed anything, it'll be on the recording, and that will come out once I've processed it, probably first thing tomorrow morning. Have a lovely evening. Thank you for your
Okay.
attention.
Thank you
Thank
very
you for your
much.
questions.
Thank you
See you
very
soon.
much.
Bye, bye.
Bye.
לילה טוב
ביי.
לכולם.